We will walk through the available testimonies given in the case of the Commonwealth of Kentucky versus William Britton. Some of the witnesses had to be brought in to testify by warrants. One would face perjury charges, and William Britton himself would testify on his own behalf. We tried to chase down each of the names mentioned in the articles, and where available, we do give what was said on the stand. However, in a couple of cases, we could not find the accounts of the witnesses called. Come along with us as we go through the testimonies given by the newspapers in 1905. All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notifications down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine, but it convinces YouTube that we need a bigger time machine to reach more people who live history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. A little housekeeping. There is something that we would like to ask our viewers and readers to keep in mind. Many of the trials in several counties were going on at the same time, or back to back to each other. We did cover as much information as we had available about the trials of Curtis Jett and Tom Smith, and are doing so with the trial of William Britton. However, these same people will also testify in the Hargis conspiracy case and the Widow Markham wrongful death claim. The trials of Perry and Breathitt County are linked together, and many people will be seen over and over testifying in all of these cases. It would not be out of the realm of possibilities when we see the testimony given in one case, the exact same testimony was given in the next case. This is why we will briefly summarize the retelling of the testimony when newspapers list a name and say things like, quote, the same testimony was given in such and such a case, unquote. Also, please consider that in the cases of Smith, Britton, and Jett, that a lot of the testimonies given were not listed in the newspaper, but were given in much fuller detail during the two trials of the Hargis faction. There was a lot of courtroom drama surrounding the witnesses to the trial of the Commonwealth of Kentucky versus William Britton in the Fayette County Circuit Court before Judge Parker. According to the Adair County News, quote, neither of the Hargises, who are alleged to be conducting the defense, was present, nor was Thomas Cockrell, brother of the slain officer, in court, he having gone to Breathitt County to arrest Charles Robinson, wanted by the prosecution as a witness, unquote. It is unclear if Thomas Cockrell did in fact testify in the case of William Britton. We could not find his testimony if he did. However, he will show up again in later trials. We also tried to find the testimony of Charles Robinson. Charles Robinson, as we have stated before, had a warrant out for his arrest because he was considered an important witness for the prosecution. We could not find his testimony and what he saw. However, we did find where he was later involved in a political dispute and was shot and killed. We could find no evidence if this was connected to his testimony in court or not, but common sense and logic does make one question if it was so. The testimony of Mortimer Forbes. The first witness on the stand would be Mortimer Forbes of Jackson, Kentucky. Here is his testimony according to the Adair County News. Quote, the first witness this morning was Mortimer Forbes of Jackson, who said that he was crossing the street near the post office when the shooting commenced, and that, looking toward the courthouse, he saw 3 gun barrels protruding from a window. He said that he recognized Bill Britton and Curtis Jett at the window, unquote. The citizen gives a bit more detail about what Forbes testified to on the witness stand. Quote, Mortimer Forbes of Jackson testified that the 3 men were at the window from which shots were fired. He recognized Curtis Jett, but failed to recognize the others. He saw Jett, Britton, Egbert Hargis, and Jesse Spicer in the corridor of the courthouse and suggested that they should go upstairs and find out who did the shooting. To which Spicer replied, quote, if you do, you will get your damned head shot off, unquote. We do not have a cross-examination of the witness available. We do not have a complete transcript of the trial, only that which is printed in the newspaper. However, it seems that his testimony was not shakeable and that it stood the scrutiny of the defense attorney. Albert S. Johnson. Here is the testimony of Albert Johnson, according to the Adair County News. Quote, Albert S. Johnson, a resident of Jackson, said he was sitting on the steps in front of the Cardwell building for some time previous to the shooting and saw Elbert Hargis, Bill Britton, Curtis Jett, and Jesse Spicer standing in front of the Hargis store. Witnesses saw Britton cross the street in the direction of the courthouse and heard someone in the upper room of the Hargis store call to him. And Britton went back to the store and later came out and went to the courthouse. About this time, witnesses saw Jim Cockrell and Stuart Hager on the Cardwell corner, and just as the witness stepped into the Cardwell building, he heard the shooting begin. Witnesses did not come out until the firing ceased, when he saw Britton and Jett leave the courthouse and go into the direction of Hargis' store. While this witness was being examined, the Commonwealth had Charles Terry sworn in as deputy sheriff, and he was sent to Lee County to get Silas McIntosh, who is an important witness for the state. Unquote. Again, we do not have cross-examination of this witness available. However, like Forbes, his testimony must have stood up to scrutiny. We do not have the testimony of Silas McIntosh for this trial currently. However, it is hoped that one day, through digitalization, that these records will one day become available. Riley Coldiron. But by far, the most dramatic of all of the witnesses in this trial was Riley Coldiron. According to the Breathitt County News, Riley Coldiron gave testimony previously in the Breathitt County Circuit Court against William Britton. This action would lead to a lot of trouble for Coldiron, as his testimony must have fell apart on the stand. He would face 2 court hearings for perjury. In another Breathitt County News article, we see the charges of perjury was leveled at Coldiron. Quote, a demurrer was sustained to the indictment against Riley Coldiron, charged with perjury in connection with the Jett Cockrell case. Unquote. A demurrer is an objection to the complaint or counterclaim, not a motion to dismiss. It is called because it is believed that the state has made a claim which relief can be granted. A demurrer does not dispute the facts of the case, but argues that there is no legal claim, even if the facts presented by the plaintiff are true. So in the first case of perjury brought against Coldiron, it seems that his case was not completely dismissed, but neither was it going to end in a conviction. But this would not be the end of things for Coldiron concerning his testimony. We get a little more detail about the drama about the testimony given and what happened about his testimony from the B article. Quote, a sensational story was told by A.C. Bowman, foreman of the Breathitt County Grand Jury. He testified that when the grand jury was investigating the case against Will Britton for killing Cockrell, for which he afterwards was given a life sentence, Riley Coldiron had just given sensational testimony against Britton. At this point, Alex Hargis rushed into the grand jury room and by threats and angry attitude compelled the grand jury to adjourn after vainly trying to get it to investigate a charge of perjury brought by Britton's friends against Coldiron. Bowman said the case was dropped and never resumed by them through fear. Unquote. So, even though Coldiron had went before the court concerning the testimony, it seems that Alex Hargis was fearful that the jury would take into consideration what was said on the stand. This led to the jury being fearful of Hargis's and possibly retaliation. So they dropped the case in Breathitt County against Britton. This would lead to Fayette County taking up the case for trial. In a later Breathitt County News article, we see the following, quote, Riley Coldiron was reindicted for perjury because he swore before the grand jury here last year that he saw Bill Britton at the courthouse window when James Cockrell was killed. His case was moved to Lee County on a motion for change of venue. It will be remembered that Britton was convicted to a life term at Lexington recently. Unquote. It is unclear if Coldiron testified in the Britton case in Fayette County because of the trouble he was having with William Britton's supporters. However, we did find it interesting that he is mentioned several times in connection with the Britton case. William Britton, Harrison Blanton, and other witnesses. According to the Citizen newspaper, quote, in the trial of William Britton for the murder of Jim Cockrell, Harrison Blanton of Jackson testified that a few minutes after the shooting, he was in the corridor of the courthouse in Jackson and that he met Kurt Jett, Bill Britton, and Jesse Spicer together. He testified that there was no other person in the corridor at that time, and that Jett pulled out a pistol and remarked, quote, well, here's what laid him out on the cooling board. I'll go and see my kinfolks now, unquote. The testimony of Harrison Blanton is another one that we do not have a cross-examination for, but it seems that his testimony did stand, as we do not see any charges leveled against him as in the case of Coldiron. James Blanton, W. H. Pelfrey, W. N. Cope, and Sebastian Williams would all testify that they saw Curtis Jett in the window of the courthouse during the shooting of Cockrell. This would be understood that they did not see William Britton in the window at the time of the shooting. William Britton takes the stand in his own defense. Everyone in the United States has a choice whether or not to testify in their criminal court cases. William Britton takes the stand according to the Hartford Republican. Quote, William Britton on trial at Lexington for the murder of James Cockrell at Jackson testified on his own behalf and denied all connection with the killing, unquote. We do not have a list of any of the testimonies that attorney O.H. Pollard brought to give William Britton an alibi. There is no evidence given by the newspapers that Britton could have been in the office of the Master Commissioner in the courthouse during the shooting, and there is no listing for the Master Commissioner's testimony or sworn statement read to the jury that we could find. In next week's video, we will walk through the trials of William Britton, his conviction, his case going into the Appellate Court of Kentucky, and then his 2 new retrials. He would also show up again during the Hargis trial, and the result of this trial would weigh heavily on the widow Markham and the Hargis trial to come. Thank you. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the Appalachian feuds. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.